We got two brain hemispheres, and we know that the brain processes, in general, the brain processes information in this kind of like two-part system. We got the left brain and the right brain. Now this is general. This is a general idea here. There is overlap in the functions, but I'm trying to keep this. Sorry about that. Yeah, there is some overlap in the functions here, but generally speaking, the left brain deals with critical thinking, analytic thought, logic, linear thought, language, science, math, and verbal communications. It's handling verbal and analytic thought, constantly analyzing over time. And then we have the less investigated and more mysterious right brain, and it's dealing with non-critical thought, pattern recognition. We got intuition there again, that word popping up. It's more holistic. It has our pattern memory. It deals with vision, sound, 3D form and shape, and nonverbal communication. And this is where a lot of our creative thought, and here's that word again, intuition, and recognition of patterns. So we have these two different tools that we process information with in our brain, and we've been heavily indoctrinated to use the left side of our brain more than our right. The right is less discovered, less investigated in the West, and we're still trying to get a hang on exactly what goes on with the right brain. So let's look at this intuition thing that keeps popping up here. So what is the definition for intuition? Because this is a word that gets thrown around. We always hear maybe a device being intuitive, or a person being intuitive, a mother's intuition. What is it? What does it mean? Intuition, the power or faculty of attaining to direct knowledge or cognition without rational thought or inference. That's from Webster's. The Encyclopedia of Occultism and Parapsychology defines intuition as that sense of faculty in the human mind by which man knows or may know facts of which he would otherwise not be cognizant, acts which might not be apparent to him through the process of reason or so-called scientific proof. So we're dealing with a faculty, a sense or faculty in the human that allows them to get information that is not conventional. It doesn't use a scientific method. It doesn't use rational thought or thought or reference. It's not rational. It's a direct knowledge or cognition. So it's very mysterious. There aren't many, authoritative definitions for intuition. It's a very mysterious topic because, as we'll see, this is a touchy subject for different reasons. So I just want to give you some background information on this whole idea of the other senses, right? So as we were talking about in an earlier slide, there's different takes on how many senses we have. Some say 5, 6, 33, there's all these different numbers floating around. So here's a little bit from Deciphering the Senses, the Expanding World of Human Perception. This is from the inside leaf of the book. It says, and I said this at the beginning, I'm going to repeat it again here. For centuries, we have used an oversimplified and inaccurate model to explain the human senses. Even now, high school biology classes still teach the 5 senses, but recent scientific research has discovered that there are many more than 5 senses, and these discoveries have radically changed our understanding of what the senses are and how they work. Rivlin and Gravel redefine for the general reader the spectrum of human perceptions from the normal to the newly discovered to the extrasensory. And now I'm going to read this bottom take here is from Ingo Swann's Secret of Power, and he's talking about this little blurb from the book. He's saying, now lest there be some misunderstanding here, the two authors are not describing psychological or mental functions. They are discussing the actual existence within our biology of minute physical, chemical, bioelectromagnetic receptors and sensors that interact with the networks of information processing resources of the organism. So they're not talking about some kind of mental thing that goes on in our heads. When they talk about expanding human perception and the 5 senses, they're actually speaking of actual sense organs new sense organs that have been discovered within the body, actual physical, chemical, bioelectromagnetic receptors and sensors that we didn't know about before. And he says here, Engel says here, it's quite easy to ascertain that 5 senses are obviously not enough to account for the huge range of sensory possibilities of which the human species is capable. No one can survive very well on just 5 senses. Ask any seafarer, mountain climber, football or basketball player, explorer or inventor, martial artist expert, or even someone seeking sex. The moment automatic reflexes or intuitive stuff enters into their talk, you know that you have departed from the realm of physical 5 and entered into the realms of additional senses. Right? So what are some of these sensors and receptors that we're speaking about? Well, we're talking about, and this may seem like science fiction to some people, but this is the real deal. These are real discoveries that happened once these are real sensors and receptors that were found after we developed the electron microscope. We were never able to see inside of cells and see the small, minute, tiny things that were inside our body. And so these are some of the receptors and sensors that have been found in the human body. So, keep your seatbelt on for this one. But some of them at the same time you may become familiar and realize that there were experiences in your life where you actually interacted with these senses and used them yourself. So receptors, I'm going to highlight a few. Receptors in the nose sensing systems that smell emotions and that can identify motives, sexual receptivity, antagonism, benevolence, and all these are formats of what is commonly referred to as like vibe sensing. You pick up someone's vibe, someone enters the room, and all of a sudden you feel a certain way. Directional finding and locating receptors in the endocrine and neuropeptide systems. And if you're familiar with dowsing, this could play a part in dowsing, helping senses that help you find direction. Whole body receptors, including hair, that identify fluidic motions of horizontal, vertical, diagonal, and even not visually perceived things. So like in the martial art Aikido, there's a whole psychic portion where the practitioner is able to respond to things that movements and things that he doesn't even see. There's a famous clip of the guy using a sword to cut a bullet. Obviously, he wasn't seeing that with his eyes. Receptors that trigger alarm and apprehension before their sources are directly perceived. So a type of psychic foresight, intuition. So people have hunches, bad feelings about things. These are more than just random thoughts in your head. These are the information from those feelings is coming from a sense organ. So if the pineal gland is fully functional, it acts as a non-visual photoreceptor. A lot of talk about pineal gland this and decalcify pineal gland that. In the last few years, a lot of attention on the pineal gland. Not a lot of uses. Not a lot of people actually showing an actual use of this, amazing pineal gland. Well, it turns out it can be a non-visual photoreceptor if you can get a hold of it, and we're going to look at that a bit later. Sense of magnetic fields. Whole body receptors to detect pheromones, sexual receptivity, fear, love, admiration, danger, pain in others, intentions in others, formerly so-called vibe sensing or psychic reading. You know what I mean? So these are some of the sensors and receptors that have been found in the human body that can help account for these, additional senses that we have. So let's move along. 2 brains. We talked about the 2 hemispheres of the brain. Well, it turns out that we seem to have this kind of 2-part mind, and maybe even more than 2 parts, but in a general idea, we have conscious awareness, and then we have this whole idea of a subconscious or unconscious mind. And in between them, there's a threshold. And I made this little diagram of an iceberg in the water. And the tip of the iceberg that's like conscious awareness, what's above the surface, a little bit above the surface. That's what we take as all the information that we're getting. We think our conscious awareness is fully informed, and is making all the right choice. Is making the choices is kind of like the awareness in charge, so to speak. But it turns out that there's an approximated 11 million bits of information transferred from the sensing systems to the brain each second. So, but according to textbooks on human physiology, the conscious part, above the threshold of awareness, seems to only be able to get a grasp on somewhere between 16 and 50 bits per second. So out of 11 million bits of information that our senses are sending to our conscious awareness, only about 16 to 50 bits per second is actually being brought into conscious awareness. So there's kind of like this barrier between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And a lot of the action's going on in the subconscious area, where we, as in our waking state, are completely out of the loop. We don't really have any say or feel in that, most of the time. So this is an interesting key to this intuition and non-local perception. We're going to find out this whole idea of the subconscious mind and what else could be inside of it, the other parts or the other faculties in there, is an important part to this research. Not a lot of people, scientifically speaking, nowadays talk much about the subconscious mind, but in the past, authors were open and they would talk about this idea of the subconscious mind all the time.